My name is Alyssa Hartwell. I was 34 years old when I finally understood that silence can be a form of loyalty and also a form of self-betrayal. I grew up believing that family wasn't optional. It was gravity. You didn't choose how close you were. You simply orbited, pulled by obligation, expectation, and guilt dressed up as love. In our family, showing up wasn't praised, it was assumed, especially if you were me. From the outside, we looked like a perfectly ordinary middle-class family in suburban Arizona. A ranch-style house in Tempe, neatly trimmed hedges, a minivan in the driveway that never seemed quite clean. My father, David, worked as an insurance adjuster, steady income, dependable hours. My mother, Margaret, taught 4th grade at Desert Hills Elementary, the kind of teacher whose students still visited years later. Inside the house, though, the balance was never equal. I am the older child, 4 years older than my brother James. 4 years that, in hindsight, might as well have been a lifetime. From the moment James was born, the axis of our household shifted. I wasn't pushed out abruptly. It was subtler than that. A slow recentering. Conversations curved toward him, excuses bent around him. Expectations hardened around me. I was the serious one, straight A's, rule follower, the child my parents never worried about. James was charming, athletic, struggled academically, needed help. In another family, that difference might have balanced out. In ours, it created a hierarchy that would define the rest of my life. I remember my high school graduation vividly. I was valedictorian. I had earned a partial scholarship to Arizona State University, accepted into their competitive engineering program. I stood at the podium in my cap and gown, hands shaking, delivering a speech I'd rehearsed for weeks. My parents were there. They clapped, smiled. That night, we went to Olive Garden. A quick dinner, a card with $50 inside. Then, without missing a beat, the conversation shifted to James's upcoming football championship. 2 weeks later, when James's team won state, my parents hosted a backyard barbecue. Extended family, neighbors, a banner stretched across the fence. They bought him a brand new Xbox as a reward for all his hard work. It wasn't the money that hurt. It was the enthusiasm gap. College made the disparity impossible to ignore. Despite my scholarship, I still had tuition to cover. My parents contributed what they could, about a quarter of the cost, but made it clear the rest was my responsibility. I took out modest loans and worked 3 part-time jobs. Mornings at Starbucks, evenings at the campus library. Weekends doing construction with my uncle's company. I slept 4 hours a night, sometimes less. James, meanwhile, attended a private university in California. Higher tuition, lower grades. My parents paid for everything: tuition, housing, meal plan, even spending money. When I asked my father about it once, carefully, quietly, he said, "James isn't as independent as you, Alyssa. He needs more support." That sentence would follow me for decades. After graduation, I discovered I had a real talent for construction project management. I saved aggressively, worked my way up at Southwest Construction, took night classes in business administration. At 27, I launched Hartwell Contracting. The first 3 years nearly broke me. 80-hour weeks. Sleeping on an air mattress in my office to avoid rent. Reinvesting every dollar back into the business. No vacations, no weekends, no safety net. James, during that same period, drifted. Job to job, passion to passion, sports bars, parties. When he turned 26, he announced he wanted to open a craft brewery. No brewing experience, no business plan. My parents remortgaged their house to give him $85,000 in startup capital. The brewery failed in 10 months. James blamed the location, the competition, the economy, anyone but himself. My parents wrote off the loss with barely a conversation. Around that time, my father had a mild heart attack. Insurance covered most of it, but there was still a $35,000 gap. I paid it without hesitation. They thanked me, but there was an air of expectation, as if this was simply my role now, the reliable daughter, the safety net. Sunday dinners became showcases for James's latest ideas. My business successes earned polite nods at best. Last year, when my parents mentioned struggling with mortgage payments due to rising property taxes, I set up an automatic transfer. $3,200 a month. Money I could have invested, saved, used to finally buy my own home. But they were my parents. And despite everything, I loved them. That's why, when I received the call from their attorney about an estate planning meeting, I wasn't worried. I assumed, naively, that fairness would finally prevail. I couldn't have been more wrong. The call from William Bradford, my parents' attorney, came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was overseeing a kitchen renovation in Scottsdale. I was standing in the middle of exposed framing, clipboard tucked under my arm, listening to a subcontractor explain a plumbing delay when my phone buzzed. "Miss Hartwell," Bradford said, his voice professionally neutral. "Your parents have requested your presence at an estate planning meeting this Friday." Estate planning. The words should have reassured me. Instead, something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "It would be better to discuss matters in person," he replied smoothly. I told myself I was imagining things. After years of carrying my family financially, surely this meeting would reflect that reality. Surely, when it came to matters of legacy and fairness, emotion would give way to logic. Friday arrived with brutal Arizona heat. I drove downtown, pulling into the parking garage beneath a glass and steel law office that screamed expensive hourly rates. I dressed carefully. Dark slacks, pressed button down. Construction didn't require polish, but respect mattered in rooms like this. The receptionist directed me to conference room B. The moment I stepped inside, I knew. My parents sat rigidly on one side of a long mahogany table, bodies angled slightly away from each other, as if bracing for impact. My father stared down at his folded hands. My mother clutched her purse in her lap like a life raft. James sat beside them, scrolling on his phone, a Rolex gleaming on his wrist. One I knew he hadn't paid for himself. William Bradford sat at the head of the table, manila folders stacked with surgical precision. "Alyssa," he said, gesturing to the empty chair across from them. "Thank you for coming. Now that everyone's here, we can begin." The room felt cold despite the desert sun outside. Abstract corporate art lined the walls, blues, grays, nothing warm. "As you know," Bradford began, "we're here to discuss David and Margaret's estate planning. They've made some decisions they feel are important to communicate clearly." He opened the top folder. "I'll be direct," he continued. "Your parents have decided to place all their assets in James's name, designating him as the sole beneficiary of their estate." The words didn't register at first. They floated, disconnected from meaning. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked. Bradford didn't flinch. "Their house, investment accounts, insurance policies, and personal belongings will transfer to James upon their passing." I turned to my parents. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. My father finally looked up, his expression strained. "You'll receive," Bradford added, "your father's coin collection and your grandmother's recipe box, per your mother's request." I felt physically ill. "A coin collection?" I repeated. "A recipe box?" "This is a joke," I said, scanning their faces. "Right?" "Alyssa," my father said, his voice wavering. "We talked about this a lot. You're successful. You've built something solid. James needs more security." My mother nodded quickly. "You've always been so capable. We're just being practical." Practical. I turned back to Bradford. "Can you outline the assets?" He nodded. "The house, valued at approximately $750,000. Investment accounts totaling around $220,000. Life insurance policies with combined benefits of $350,000. My chest tightened. "And," he continued, "your parents recently took out a new mortgage on the house to provide capital for James's new business venture." My head snapped up. "What mortgage?" $325,000, Bradford said. "Monthly payments of $3,200, the exact amount I'd been transferring every month." The room tilted. "You didn't need help with the mortgage," I said slowly. "The house was paid off." James shifted uncomfortably. "It's for a sports complex," my mother said quickly, pride sneaking into her voice. "In Chandler. Very promising." I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound came out hollow. "So let me understand this," I said. "You took out a new mortgage on your debt-free house to finance James's business, knowing I was covering the payments. And then you structured your will so everything goes to him." Silence. "And you expected me to just keep paying?" I asked. My father cleared his throat. "We hoped you'd continue supporting us during the transition. Once James's business takes off..." "This is betrayal," I said quietly. "Don't be dramatic," James cut in, rolling his eyes. "It's not like you need the money." I stared at him. This man who had received everything while contributing nothing, who couldn't even acknowledge the imbalance. Bradford interjected gently. "I did suggest a more equitable distribution, but your parents were firm." That hurt more than I expected. I stood, collecting my jacket. "Thank you for your transparency, Mr. Bradford." "Alyssa, wait," my mother said. "We should talk, as a family. Sunday dinner." I looked at them, my parents, my brother, the carefully stacked folders documenting my erasure. "I won't be there," I said. "I have some financial planning of my own to do." That night, I went through my records with forensic precision. Every transfer, every payment. The total stunned me. Over $220,000 in 6 years. And then I saw it. Withdrawals from my parents' account, large ones, followed by deposits into James's account the next day. They hadn't just favored him. They'd been funneling my money to him all along. Something inside me went cold. And I was standing at a job site in Mesa, reviewing plumbing schematics with a subcontractor, when my phone began vibrating nonstop in my pocket. I ignored it at first. Construction sites are loud, chaotic places, and I've learned the hard way that reacting emotionally in front of a crew only undermines authority. But when the buzzing didn't stop, I stepped aside and glanced at the screen. 6 notifications, all from my parents. From Mom. "There must be an error with the bank. Your transfer didn't go through." From Dad. "Call immediately. This is urgent." 3 missed calls in less than 5 minutes. I slid the phone back into my pocket and finished the meeting, nodding, asking questions, maintaining a calm professionalism that felt almost surreal, given the storm I knew was coming. When we wrapped up, I drove straight to my office instead of home. "Carmen," I told my assistant the moment I walked in, "hold all non-urgent calls for the next hour." She looked up, concerned, but nodded. She'd worked with me long enough to recognize the tone. I closed my office door, sat down, and breathed. This was the moment everything shifted. When I finally called my parents, my mother answered on the first ring. "Alyssa, thank God," she said, her voice already trembling. "Has there been some kind of banking error?" "It's not an error," I replied evenly. "I canceled the transfers." Silence. "What?" she whispered. "The mortgage payment is due in 2 days," she said quickly. "We'll be in serious trouble if it doesn't go through." "I'm aware," I said. There was muffled movement. Then my father's voice replaced hers. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded. "Your mother is crying." "I'm establishing financial boundaries," I said. "Something I should have done years ago." "We're your parents," he snapped. "You don't set boundaries with family." "I raised myself financially from 18 onward," I replied. "And I've paid you back many times over." That set him off. "We gave you a roof, food, stability. And I've contributed over $220,000 to your household in 6 years," I interrupted, my voice still calm. "Money that funded James's education, his failed brewery, and now this mortgage for another business I was never told about." "That's not fair," my mother cried in the background. "We sacrificed so much for you." The gaslighting was almost impressive. "You eliminated me from your will," I said. "You used my money to secure James's future. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a pattern." My father's voice hardened. "If this is how you want it, don't bother coming to Sunday dinner ever again." I felt something unexpected. Relief. "That works for me," I said. "Goodbye." The line went dead. Over the next 2 weeks, the pressure campaign escalated. Daily calls. Voicemails thick with accusation and confusion. From Mom. We don't understand why you're punishing us. From Dad. Family doesn't do this to each other. One voicemail arrived late at night, my mother sobbing. After everything we've sacrificed for you. I didn't respond. 3 days after the transfers stopped, I received a text that would define the entire ordeal. Mortgage payment due today. Bank threatening foreclosure if not received by 5 p.m. I stared at the message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen, muscle memory urging me to fix it, to rescue, to smooth things over. Instead, I typed 2 words, not mine. I hit send. The reply came almost immediately. A single crying emoji. Then silence. Weeks passed. Through my cousin Ashley, I learned what was happening behind the scenes. My parents had missed 2 payments. The bank had issued formal notices. James's sports complex, still half built, was hemorrhaging money. He had to take a part-time job, Ashley told me during one of our weekly check-ins. Reality's hitting hard. Extended family members began asking questions. The story my parents had told for years, that I was just helping out a little, didn't hold up once numbers entered the conversation. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived, handwritten, my father's precise handwriting. Dear Alyssa, I have started and discarded this letter a dozen times. He acknowledged the favoritism, the expectation, the imbalance. Selling the house and downsizing has been humbling, he wrote. For the first time in years, we're living within our means. I called him 2 days later. The conversation was awkward, careful, but honest in a way it had never been before. That honesty, fragile and overdue, changed everything. The weeks that followed my father's letter felt like standing on unfamiliar ground after an earthquake. Everything was still there. Family, history, shared memories, but the structure underneath had shifted, permanently. I didn't rush reconciliation. I'd learned the hard way that speed often favors those eager to return to old patterns. Instead, I moved deliberately, carefully, as if rebuilding trust were a construction project requiring permits, inspections, and a solid foundation. I met my father for coffee 2 weeks after our phone call. A small cafe near his new condo, smaller, quieter, nothing like the house they'd lived in for 30 years. He looked older. Not dramatically so, but subtly. His shoulders sloped inward now. His confidence, once quiet but unshakable, had softened. I'm glad you came, he said, fingers wrapped tightly around his mug. So am I replied, and meant it. He didn't defend himself. That alone was new. Instead, he talked. About fear, about guilt, about how they'd convinced themselves that leaning on me was logical because I never complained. How James's struggles had felt louder, more urgent, while my competence had been mistaken for immunity. We didn't realize we were taking from you, he said quietly, until you stopped giving. That sentence stayed with me. My mother took longer. When she finally reached out, it was with a message that read, I don't know how to say this without sounding like I'm asking for something, but I am sorry. We met weeks later, sitting across from each other in a public park, sunlight filtering through desert trees. She cried, not theatrically, not manipulatively, but with exhaustion, with regret. I thought love meant helping the child who needed it most, she said. I didn't see that I was hurting the one who never asked. I didn't absolve her. I didn't punish her either. I listened. James was the hardest. Our conversation didn't happen by chance. I asked for it. We met at a neutral place, a sports bar he liked, one that no longer felt celebratory but habitual. He looked uncomfortable, defensive, then quietly ashamed as I laid out the numbers, the reality, the pattern. I didn't know it was that much, he said finally. You didn't ask, I replied. He admitted his resentment, how my success had made him feel small, how entitlement had become armor. I thought you didn't mind, he said. You never said no. That was the most painful truth of all. I should have, I said, but that doesn't excuse what happened. Something shifted that night. Not redemption, not forgiveness. Accountability. During this time, my own life was changing too. My relationship with Jake, an architect I'd started dating months earlier, deepened quietly. He never asked for explanations I wasn't ready to give, never tried to fix anything. He listened, supported, stood beside me without leaning. "You don't owe anyone access to you," he said once, as we sat on my couch reviewing blueprints for a joint project, including family. That kind of understanding felt revolutionary. By Christmas, I made a decision. I offered my parents help with a down payment on their condo. Once, clearly defined. No monthly transfers, no expectations. I told them this was not a return to the old arrangement. They accepted with genuine gratitude, not entitlement. That mattered. Family dinners resumed, but monthly now. Optional. Balanced. James took his management job seriously. For the first time, he asked questions, took notes, learned. Watching him grow wasn't satisfying in the way revenge stories promise. It was quieter, more real. The family we were becoming was smaller, less dramatic, less dependent, but healthier. And for the first time, I felt like I belonged to it by choice, not obligation. The new year arrived quietly. No dramatic reset, no sweeping declarations, just small, deliberate choices stacking on top of one another, day by day. That was the biggest difference. Before, my life had been a series of reactions: financial emergencies, emotional crises, last-minute rescues. Now there was space, silence that didn't demand to be filled, time that belonged to me. Hartwell Contracting continued to grow, but differently than before. I stopped chasing every project. I hired 2 senior managers, trusted them with decisions I used to hoard out of habit, not necessity. For the first time since launching the company, I took a real vacation. 5 days in Sedona, with no laptop, no emergency calls, no guilt. Jake came with me. We spent mornings hiking red rock trails, afternoons reading in the shade, evenings cooking simple meals together. There was no tension in the quiet, no sense that something was about to be demanded. One night, as the desert sky turned deep violet, he asked, "Do you feel lighter?" I thought about it. "Yes," I said, "but not because things are perfect, because I finally know what's mine to carry and what isn't." That clarity changed everything. My parents adjusted in ways I hadn't expected. Living smaller forced them to be honest, with each other and with themselves. My father's part-time consulting grew into a modest but steady operation. He talked about work now with the same excitement he once reserved for James's ventures. My mother surprised me most of all. She began volunteering at a local literacy program, then accepted a paid position as a reading specialist. The pride she took in it wasn't performative, it was grounded. One evening after dinner, she said quietly, "I forgot how good it feels to contribute without borrowing from someone else." James's transformation was slower, uneven, but real. The sports complex closed before finishing construction. There was no bailout this time. He worked, failed, learned. His management job taught him structure, accountability, humility. He started dating a woman who challenged him, who didn't applaud excuses or tolerate half effort. For the first time, our conversations weren't about what he needed from me. They were just conversations. In early spring, during one of our now monthly family dinners, my mother paused mid-sentence and looked around the table. "It's strange," she said. "For years, I worried about what would happen to this family if Alyssa stopped supporting us financially. I never imagined we'd end up stronger because of it." No one argued. Later that night, Jake and I drove home under a sky scattered with stars. "Do you regret it?" he asked gently. "How it all happened?" I thought of the years of quiet resentment, the nights staring at bank statements, convincing myself it was temporary, the lawyer's office, the words, "not mine." "I regret not doing it sooner," I said, before resentment had time to harden. "But I don't regret choosing myself." He reached for my hand. "That's the bravest thing you could have done." A few months later, on an unremarkable evening in our backyard, Jake proposed. No audience, No spectacle, just the two of us, desert sunset washing the sky in gold and amber. I cried, not from surprise, but from gratitude. Gratitude that I'd survived the years of imbalance. Gratitude that I'd learned to stand without apologizing. Gratitude that I'd found a partner who didn't measure love by what I provided, but by who I was. We planned a small wedding, close friends, a few supportive relatives, nothing extravagant. When my father walked me down the aisle, his hand trembled. His eyes were wet, not with expectation this time, but with pride and regret intertwined. My mother cried softly, not theatrically, not manipulatively, genuinely. I let them be there not because I'd forgotten the past, but because I was building a future that wasn't chained to it. Our vows were simple, honest, promises that didn't feel conditional. In the home Jake and I designed together, I now wake each morning without the old anxiety, the constant anticipation of the next financial emergency, the next emotional demand. My business thrives. My marriage is steady. My family, imperfect, scarred, exists within boundaries that protect everyone. I know now that I am more than what I provide. I am worthy of love that doesn't extract payment. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is say no. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to enable their dysfunction, even when it means walking away from everything you were taught to be. 2 simple words changed everything, not mine. They didn't just free me, they gave all of us a chance to grow.